other students of color and listen as my white peers theorize the hell out of the oppression that we were born from. Buzzwords like institutionalized oppression and class warfare with sugar on their tongues, sweet and comfortable. Words from a language my community didn't even know exist because we were too busy living the realities of them. You see, it's one thing to major in ethnic studies, y'all. It is a whole nother thing to be the reason for its existence. You see, for the white students in my major, ethnic studies was like a free study abroad program that didn't require that they bring their baggage with them. A privilege that is easy for them to close in their textbook at the end of class. You see, my life is beginning to feel a lot like a free ethnic studies lecture with no tenure. Is this what they meant by public education? But study my racial profile till it exhausts you. Study how black has been made to feel like the green light for stop and frisk. How brown has been made to feel like a much needed check stop at any given border. Ask me what it's like to have my skin be made to feel like the nuclear missile we all know is coming, and you still won't know what it's like to sit in the back of a class and be studied because of how tragic your history is. As if we've only been brought in to be dissected. As if frogs, rats, and people of color can only be understood when you cut them open. You see, when ethnic studies, it is not school anymore, y'all. It is a lesson in survival. And I'm so tired of playing teacher with my oppression. If I'm not doing it on a stage, I'm doing it from the margins of a classroom. I'm doing it from the margins in my notebook. Always on the margins of something, never the core. Never asked to be anything more than what makes it easy to feel sorry for. You see, it's easy to avoid confronting the things that make us feel uncomfortable, the things that make us feel guilty. Who chooses to walk through the war zone if you're told that you don't have to? If you grew up believing that there isn't one? If what you don't know won't kill you? Race is the rent I pay for this skin. So the belief that racism doesn't exist anymore, especially in my own major, is when I feel the foreclosure of this home taking my knees from right under me. You can't claim that racism doesn't exist if you've never known what it means to survive it. If you keep looking at the war zone like a teaching moment you're not ready to learn the lesson from, a comfort zone you're not willing to sacrifice. You see, it's easy, y'all, to avoid confronting the things that make us feel uncomfortable, things that make us feel guilty. But comfort is what kills us in the long run, y'all. Comfort is sitting down when you should be on your feet. Comfort is staying quiet when you should be speaking up. Comfort is speaking too much when you should be listening. Comfort is building borders for safety and not bridges for healing. Comfort is celebrating diversity, but never discussing it. As if a black president was enough. As if a heritage month is enough. As if ethnic studies is enough. As if this poem is enough. Comfort is sitting in the front of the class, forgetting that we are all sitting right behind you, wanting to remind you that the war zone still exists, wanting to tell you that this is not comfortable for any of us.
In so many ways, and my brother Vika illuminated it. Also, please help me just give it up for Vika one more time, y'all. Even begin to thank you so much for the path you've paved for not just me, but our entire community ever since knowing you and beyond knowing you. You are what we should all refer to as a pioneer in this community, and who I always turn to as a beacon of light in my life when I'm doing this work. So thank you so much, brother, for everything you've done for our community and continue to do for our community. I love you too. I think something that he's illuminated in what he was talking about is for our people, for Pacifica people, education is more than just these degrees. We are literally trying to heal. We're trying to reconcile. We're trying to relearn things. We're trying to learn the truth of things. We're trying to not disappear. We're trying to tell our story so no one else ever has to get paid to do it for us. We're trying to do so many things beyond just graduating from institutions like this. And I'm excited to celebrate this library guide because so much of this existence of this library guide reminds me of my own experiences as a student with libraries, which I would argue to say probably began and ended in elementary school, where I really loved reading. And then by the time I got to college, I didn't know how to navigate my own library on my own campus. I didn't know how essential it was supposed to be up until my last year at UC Santa Cruz. And I remember entering that library on 2 occasions. 1, to finish and do my senior thesis, and then 2, to do the only research paper that mattered to me at that time, which was a research paper on Pacific Islander women's health. Fast forward to applying to grad school, and I struggled because I applied to the University of Hawaii Manoa's Pacific Island Studies program, and I got in. And I applied to USC's master's program in marriage family therapy, and I got in. And so there I was in 2013, sitting between a really difficult decision. What do I do? Do I want to study and become an expertise in clinical psychology and return to my community as a therapist with all these tools and knowledge of how do we best serve ourselves when it comes to mental health? Or do I want to take the research historian route, which I love the thought of, and deepen the wealth of knowledge that's already in existence by living in the Pacific and doing that work? I turned to so many scholar friends of mine at that time for guidance, including my dear friend Craig Santos Perez, who, by the way, was definitely on the side of trying to get me to come to UH. But what it came down to for me is that my ultimate goal with wanting to go to grad school was so that I could come back to my community with more resources, more knowledge, and more expertise in a field that I believe can benefit from having a Pacific Islander scholar like myself in the program, even if I was, again, the only one. For those reasons, I chose USC because, to me, studying therapy, healing, trauma, and all these other mental health issues was indeed an avenue of clinical psychology that led to Pacific Island studies, even if it wasn't formally named as such. Even as I was determined to take every research paper opportunity and class presentation as a chance to discover what literature does exist out there that pertains to mental health within the Pacific Islander community. Even as limiting as the USC Levy Library was at times when it came to trying to find enough or accurate or non-problematic journal articles on Pacific Islander mental health. There were countless times in grad school where I sat there as the only Pacific Islander in my cohort, realizing that this field of psychology, much like many other fields out there, is severely lacking when it comes to empirical research on the Pacific Islander community. And it felt so disheartening at times. There were parts of me that wondered, man, like maybe I made the wrong decision in coming here. Maybe I should have taken the more familiar route and went to UH to get my master's in PI studies, because at least there, I know what I'm getting into, and I'm certain I'll be surrounded by the kind of love and support that every student deserves, and I'll be surrounded by my people. But then there were more days that left me fired up at USC rather than in doubt, because I got to a point where I had a critical understanding on how I refused to be a victim of circumstance any longer in an education system that truly wasn't designed to give us anything, y'all. I had to get it for myself. I had to research how to get it for myself. I had to accept the fact that if something is lacking or doesn't exist that needs to exist, then maybe I have to create it. I have to spend more time researching beyond USC, beyond the American education system, until my findings land me in library search engines on universities in the Pacific. I have to advocate to my professors just what needs to happen in our grad program in order for it to better reflect the needs of future Pacific Islander mental health clinicians like myself. I have to send a random fangirl Facebook message, this is a true story, to my favorite Pacific Islander scholar, the late, great Terisa Siagatonu, to ask her if I can pick her brain about how to survive higher education as a Pacific Islander woman, especially one like myself who, like herself, saw a future in which a PhD is waiting for me somewhere in the distant future. Family, when something excludes us, forgets about us, doesn't put in the work to show up for us, we come from a history of turning to each other and remembering that we come from a people who navigated this struggle before. We come from ancestors who did not wait for anyone to give them what they needed, to teach them how to get to where they needed to go. We come from ancestors who already knew how to read, as evidenced by the way they've navigated our vacas for centuries by reading books called The Stars, the Sun, the Wind, and the Ocean We Come From. For a people like ours, this critical Pacific Islands library guide was always a matter of when, and not a matter of how or who. This guide was always in the stages of creation every time a Pacific Islander student was admitted to this campus and survived, not just graduated, but survived by holding on to their culture, our traditions, their families, and their knowledge while making their way through a rigid American educational experience that isn't equipped to hold the vastness of us. Every time a Pacific Islander student here got frustrated by not being able to see themselves represented in their syllabus for their classes, but overly represented in athletics. Every time a Pacific Islander student here had to defend their identity in AAPI spaces that unconsciously left them at the margins of what is supposed to be their community too. This library guide is here now because we exist in a time where our community has had enough of being treated like the smallness that everyone believes we are because of the islands we come from, not knowing that we come from the biggest body of water this world has. One that is not only challenging the rest of the world to simply see and accept us on issues ranging from education to climate change to basic-ass human rights, but to actually value and nurture our existence, that we exist, and that because of our efforts, like the creation of this library guide, we truly are not going anywhere. So I just want to say congratulations again to everyone who put this library guide together and made it possible. Give it up for Apazdi and the Ethnic Studies Library once more for making this happen. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to close out with one last poem. Is that cool?
You guys were already doing it, but if you, spoken word and poetry is very much a call and response oral tradition of sorts. And so you don't have to sit there like you're in the library studying, even though we are in the library. You can react by doing things like snapping your fingers. Can I hear you snap your fingers? You can pretend like you're taking a bite of your favorite food and you can say, you can say things like, yes. Go in, poet. Go in, poet. So, yeah, we love you, poet, right? If you don't like what you hear, you can talk to me after. Also, thank you, Sina, for mentioning that this library guide is beyond just academic, scholarly articles. You also have YouTube videos. You also, because making a point that we're trying to figure out how to be critical about the way we learn and take in knowledge, too. That how do we decolonize that for ourselves so that we don't buy into these Western forms that actually were not designed with us in mind, and not designed with our learning processes in mind, right? And I have to remind myself sometimes, like, you know, not to fall into that trap of academia, of like, just because I have a background in it, our ancestors did a lot more without degrees that we can't even fathom, that we don't even have a language for yet, that I feel so viscerally when I perform poetry. So I was having breakfast with my father the other day, and he started taking the conversation into a direction that I dread the most. The part where he asks me for the millionth time, when am I going to get my PhD? His voice is a stern and steady tremble. His broken English always gets nervous every time it is in conversation with mine. He makes getting a PhD sound so simple, y'all. So my family, education has always been a miracle of sorts, and I've become the holiest place they can turn to for refuge. In all my years of being a student, I've learned that education is like healing the wounded. Some of us get an education so that we could get a good job, and some of us get one just so we can heal. A lot of us get one so that our parents can breathe. School has always been an emergency room of sorts, an incubator keeping my family's American dream alive. It's the reason I had no other choice but to go to school and graduate, the way my father never did. And not just school, college, the way my mother never will. And not just college, y'all, grad school, PhD, the whole 9 yards. This is the part of the dream where my parents don't care to wake up. The part where my future is their retirement plan. That this is what they left Samoa for. The reason my father enlisted in the U.S. Army for 20 years. The reason he retired disabled and used his military benefits to pay for my tuition in full. This is the sacrifice my mother made to drop out of community college to take care of her 7 brothers. The reason my graduation robes felt so heavy on me each time I walked across the stage to get both my high school diploma and both my college degrees. The weight of our ancestry reminding me that Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander is one of the fastest growing populations in this country, with some of the lowest graduation rates and highest high school dropout rates. It's the reason only 18% of us hold a bachelor's degree. The reason only 17% of our kids passed all college readiness benchmarks in English, reading, math, and science. It is the reason why out of 885 Army recruitment stations, American Samoa is ranked #1 in the world for enlisting the most people. So to me, graduation didn't signify that I made it. It just meant that I was one of them that survived. The 18%. The one that tested well enough for California to never leave behind. The one that slipped through the cracks out of the projects and into all AP classes. So I guess you can say that I was lucky enough to be on the right track. An accelerated learner. The one too polite to be misdiagnosed with ADHD. The one that was always told to look ahead at her future, but never down at her feet. Look at the cracks. Notice the hands of the kids in my community grabbing at my ankles. The ones that the village was too busy to raise. The ones that the teachers are too busy to teach. The ones that are always sent to detention, but never the college and career setting. The ones who never learn about the Pacific Islands in the classroom, but who everyone knows on the football field. The ones that coaches scout like a wolf pack, promising them an athletic scholarship, but never a college degree. The one that military recruiters dream about before bed each night. The ones that are never taught the difference between potential and prison, future and failure, classroom and casket. The ones that are never taught that education is like healing the wounded. Some of us need an education just so we can heal. Because if I've learned anything about being a student, it's not that school taught me how to think critically. It taught me what to think critically about. Wow. To the students here at Cal, please, don't forget that you can love the village that raised you while also holding it accountable for your success. You deserve to succeed as the brilliant scholar that you are, because you're not stupid. You're not a failing statistic. You're more than an athletic scholarship, more than a soldier with a gun. Teach them that graduation doesn't get to happen without you. What it truly means to never leave a child behind. The classroom needs both your voice and your mind. The way our islands need your legacy. You are the most important family heirloom we have. The reason our people read the stars first. The reason the rest of the world calls us the pioneers of navigation. We've always known what we're destined for as long as you're leading the way. You are the ocean that our islands depend upon for their survival. Education is like healing the wounded, and no one deserves to heal more than you do. Thank you all.